Welcome back to our module, Launching Your Stellar LinkedIn Profile. In this lesson, we are tackling your experience. In this overall module, we're working from the top of your LinkedIn profile all the way to the bottom. And I'm excited to dive into this one. On screen in front of me, I've got my curriculum. I'm going to be pulling things up on screen for you. We're actually also going to talk about education, licenses, and certifications at the end of this lesson. But first, I want to start with experience. Remember, course subscribers, you have a wealth of resources at your fingertips. I believe the most important thing for you is the library of completed LinkedIn profiles that you can browse when referencing experience and working on your own. Let's dive into your experience. And this is the easiest part if you've been through Resume Bootcamp and your resume is finished. So I'm going to do a plug here for Resume Bootcamp. If you've not worked on your experience and you haven't been through that course, just go back and do that. It's definitely worth your time. You can listen to this education first and then resort back to the education that we provide about building your experience in RBC. It's very valuable. Our goal on LinkedIn, though, is to highlight major accomplishments at previous positions that support your digital elevator pitch. Your headline, your about section, that whole initial impression, all of this sells you. And your experience is here to provide just enough data to support your headline and your about section. Now, I say just enough data because we're not going to be tailoring our LinkedIn every time we apply for a job. So we want to bring a very high level synopsis of our data to the position. A big mistake that you can make is trying to tailor your LinkedIn every time you're applying for a job. Chances are, if an employer is looking at you seriously, they've evaluated your LinkedIn and they're going to return to it. So if they return to your LinkedIn after you've applied and you've made changes to your LinkedIn profile that tailored yourself to another job or to the job that you applied for, if it's different from what they experienced the first time, they're going to lose trust in you and you're going to be ruled out of the hiring process. I'm not making this scenario up. I have heard of our employment partners at VertForce who have complained about this, saying we were looking at this candidate, she looked very strong for this position, or he looked very strong for this position. We returned to their LinkedIn profile and it was completely different than it was when we originally viewed it. So we had to rule them out of the process. LinkedIn in the remote world is becoming an increasingly important tool for hiring managers. They want to see who you are. If they can't see you in person or they can't see you outside of a video chat, they want to see who you are, who you're presenting to the world. So again, we're looking for high level experience that you feel comfortable leaving there permanently. And you feel comfortable that no matter what you say in these experience areas, you can deliver a compatible resume for it. So this goes back to the groundwork too. I'm going to say this. The reason why we did that groundwork in our module about building the LinkedIn Launchpad is so that you can know yourself well enough to know the kind of career you're after. I don't want you to be afraid of pigeonholing. All right, so we discussed the concept of pigeonholing, being afraid to be specific, being afraid to be niche because we want to look like we would be a good fit for any position. It's the opposite. We want to be niche, we want to be specific so that we look like we are the perfect person for specific positions. Not an okay fit for anything, but the exact resource needed for something very specific. That's what's going to benefit you. So, for the experience section, let me cover my list of don'ts with you. Number 1, do not list experience. It is not okay to just have your job title there without something in the description field of your experience. Do not be afraid of pigeonholing. Own the position that you had, own what you did there, Wordsmith it in a way so that it applies to the position that you are seeking in the future, and it tells the story of how you became who you are. Don't list every single job you've ever had with every company. Number one, it's going to date you. If you're of a certain age and you go all the way back to the 90s with where you worked and who you worked for, you're dated, okay? And we don't want to do that. We don't want to put you at risk of ageism in the workforce. And also, not every job you've ever had is applicable. So just like we teach in Resume Bootcamp, you should only include the positions that are data that support the career that you're after. So, great example. If you are seeking a career in HR, don't include roles that don't apply to your HR experience. For example, you would likely not want to list your work as a data entry clerk, right? That doesn't really support HR. And maybe you did that 5-10 years ago. It's not something that's relevant. Also, it takes a lot of time to enter your experience on LinkedIn. And I don't want you to get bored or waste your time entering data that's not relevant or supportive of where you're headed or where you're going. Don't provide limited information. So what I mean by that is I'm only going to provide the role that I performed and the company, and I'm going to leave everything else blank. That in and of itself is not providing enough information to support your headline and support your about section. And at the same time, don't provide too much information. I'm going to give you guidelines of how much information to provide right now. Do's. I want you to list 3 to 5 of your most relevant jobs. If you think you need to exceed 5, I'm not going to slam my foot down and stop you. But here's a great example. If you are, let's use this headline that we were working with earlier, a nonfiction writer serving busy entrepreneurs with timely and data-driven white papers and articles. Let's say that's your headline. It is not relevant for you to list those 3 years as a dental assistant, okay? That does not support where you're going or where you're headed. Now, if it were to come up in an interview, what other things have you done? It's fine to mention that you've been a dental assistant. We're not hiding that information. We're just not going to use that to sell ourselves. What might be relevant for you to include is 2 years as an executive assistant, where you were doing a lot of email production and writing for whoever you were working for. So we're using information and data from our past that supports where we are going. Now, how do we do that? Once we list the position, how much about that position do we discuss? Here's my rule of thumb. 3 to 5 bullets or 3 to 5 sentences, no more. Keep it brief. Remember, LinkedIn is a highlight reel. It is not a resume. We want to leave them wanting more. Leave them thinking, I need to read her resume, or I need to meet this guy in person. I need to interview them. And so my third do for you is quantify, quantify, quantify. And this goes back to Resume Bootcamp, which is why I encourage you to take that course as well if you haven't done it already. Quantifying is the magic trick to draw in eyes. All right, so when we talked earlier about building the about section, we talked about not making it too long so that it's too verbose for someone to read, not making it too short so that it looks like you didn't put any time into it. That concept applies to the experience section. We want the experience section to not be too long, not be too short. But it is a lot of content to read. So one very major strategy for experience is to call out and quantify what you did. So using terms like 50% increase of ROI, things that allow you to use numbers and percentage signs and dollar signs, putting those in your bullets or putting those in your sentences so that it draws in the eye of the recruiter or the employer who's found their way to your page and they've taken the time to expand your experience and they're really getting to know you. So definitely quantify. We have a full episode on quantification from the Resume Bootcamp series. So what I'd like to do now is bring my LinkedIn profile on screen and scroll through my experience so you can see how it is formatted. I use bullet points. I have to manipulate this, and I will show you now how I do that. I put a bullet in a Word document, and then I copy that bullet and paste it into the experience. I love the way LinkedIn that bullet points are formatted. It's cleaner to me. And I will tell you that there are some HR professionals who will say that the paragraph style on a resume will date you, because on resumes, paragraphs back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s were the way that you communicated your experience. Today, using bullet points is the standard. And we teach this in Resume Bootcamp. On LinkedIn, it's not as crucial. If you use a paragraph on LinkedIn, it's not as dating. But I will tell you that if you use a paragraph on LinkedIn, it is overwhelming to the eyeball. And I'm being very literal here. My course subscribers can see me kind of jump back when I see a big paragraph there. It's overwhelming to the eye and it's hard to read and process. I encourage you to use bullet points. If you use a paragraph, do not use more than 5 sentences. Either way, you'll be fine. And notice how I am including only my most relevant jobs. You guys, you're seeing only my most relevant work. I have had several other positions than what I am putting here in front of you, including a stint where I spent a lot of time in the interior design industry. That's not what I do. That's not where I want to go. I was an executive assistant for an interior designer for a long time, and I worked for a bunch of different interior design organizations, and it was really fun. A really great part of my career that I think I took with me later in life, because now I know how to decorate my house and I have experience understanding how the business of interior design operates, but it has nothing to do with where I'm going with my life and my career model. So allow that to teach you and allow that to be your example of what you should be including and should not be including. Let's move to the next section, education, licenses, and certifications. This is really a no-brainer. It is vitally important that you complete it and fill it out, but it is very simple to execute. I'm going to give you my guidelines for this area now. So my 2 most important rules are don't skip this and be sure to link to actual institutions. On screen now, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. It can be very easy to accidentally link to the wrong institution or not link to an institution at all. You can see here, if you misspell the institution, a gray box will populate, and it won't actually be linking to the college or the university that you attended. Now, if I respell that and do it correctly, it will link to the college. If I click the college, it will take me to that organization. General rules of thumb here: only list organizations which you attended. List them whether you graduated or not. It's okay. If you attended that school, you still have an affiliation to it. The reason why this is relevant is, for example, I went to Birmingham Southern College. Even if I didn't finish my degree there, if I finished it somewhere else, someone else who attended Birmingham Southern College would recognize me as an alum, and there we would have a connection. The more institutions that you can connect to, the better. We'll talk about this in our next module more, but one of the great tactics for connecting with people on LinkedIn is to visit organizations on LinkedIn of which you are an alumnus or an alumni, and connect with other alumni. So if you are connecting yourself as an alumni to these organizations or to these institutions at which you received certifications or licenses, then other alumni who are trying to connect can help build their network and in turn build your network by connecting with you. So it's very important that you fill that out. Another thing that I'd like to advise you is don't list your GPA. That's going to make you look like a novice. It's going to date you unless it was incredibly impressive or if you graduated in the last 2 years. So incredibly impressive means a 4.0, nothing below. A 3.9, I'm sorry, it doesn't count. A 3.8, it doesn't count. Unless you were a 4.0, do not list it, okay? And I strongly advise you not to list it at all unless you're a recent graduate or it was a 4.0. Any and all certifications you've completed need to be linked here. Try to link them to their governance body, just like the education component where we're trying to link to the actual university, we're trying to link to the college. One of the things that really frustrates me about my LinkedIn is I have a certification, but the institution from which I received it is not affiliated as a certification provider on LinkedIn. So I have this little ugly gray box on my LinkedIn profile where I can't connect to a governance body of who issued me that certification. That's out of my control. That's up to that governance body to fulfill that need, and they have not done it. So I can't control that, but you can. Just make sure you link to the right organization. With your experience, education, licenses, and certifications complete, you have accomplished a major milestone, and we're getting very close to the end of this module. You should feel like you have made a lot of progress because we're covering a ton of ground. All right, we're moving forward in finishing your profile so that you can attract the right opportunities that work for you. In the next lesson, we're covering endorsements and accomplishments, and that will be the end of this module. Let's go ahead and move into endorsements and accomplishments now.